I pretended to be a simp for my wife for 7 years, but it was all an act. Now, the time has finally come. On the day Fiona's ex-lover, Johnny Campbell, returned, she set up a spectacular fireworks display by the river to welcome him. The atmosphere was great, and they even embraced and kissed in front of everyone. I stood by, silently, quietly watching. She even threw a welcome-back party for him. On our way to the party, she glanced at me and nervously explained, "I just haven't seen Johnny in so long." I got too excited and kissed him. "You're not mad, are you?" I immediately put on a forced smile and humbly replied, "Of course not. As long as you're happy, I'll accept anything." She gave me a look of mild annoyance, then turned her gaze away. I didn't know what she was worried about. After all, I was nothing but a spineless doormat, so it was clear that I wouldn't dare to get angry. Johnny glanced at me in the rearview mirror, sneering as he said, "Fiona, this guy's worthless. He's been bullied like this, and can't even muster a peep. He's not good enough for you. You should get a divorce, and I'll marry you." I gripped the steering wheel tightly, sneaking a look at Fiona. Her eyes flickered, and I could have sworn she was a bit moved. But she stayed silent for a long time, not answering. At the party, Fiona's friends cheered loudly, welcoming Johnny back. But when they turned to look at me, their smiles quickly turned into sneers. Someone near me made a point of chatting, mocking me. Everyone knows Fiona loved Johnny for 10 whole years. If it weren't for Johnny's sudden departure abroad, she wouldn't have been too fragile and heartbroken to fall for some pathetic loser who took advantage of the situation. Now that the real deal is back, it's time for some people to step aside, don't you think? Thanks to Fiona, no one at the party had any respect for me, but I pretended I didn't notice, quietly watching Fiona. In the middle of the dance floor, Johnny took a sip of wine, pulled Fiona close, and kissed her passionately. She shyly tried to kiss him back, but realized her glass was empty. She turned to me and snapped, "Bainbridge, refill my drink. Can't you see my glass is empty?" I hurried to pour her some wine, but she disdainfully shoved me aside and kissed Johnny again. Johnny suddenly grabbed my arm, preventing me from leaving. He looked me up and down with contempt and said, "I'm really curious. How did you manage to trick a pure, noble girl like Fiona into marrying you? Everyone says you're a worthless, self-respecting loser. Show me how you lick her boots." He tilted his wine glass, letting a few drops of red wine fall onto his leather shoes. Then, with a cruel kick to my knee, he forced me to kneel and crawl like a dog. Fiona just stood there, coldly watching. I gritted my teeth and knelt, wiping Johnny's shoes with my sleeve. As the mocking laughter filled the air, I caught a glimpse of Fiona's gaze. It was full of disgust. She walked over and kicked me aside with force. "You pathetic disgrace, get away from me." She paused, then added, "I'm staying with Johnny tonight." I immediately understood her meaning and quietly booked them a room. At the hotel door, I stood stiffly. Fiona's dress was halfway off, and when she looked up and saw me, she was visibly annoyed. "Why aren't you gone yet? Don't you realize how disgusting you are?" I kept silent for a long time. When she was about to lose patience, I hesitantly whispered, "Fiona, I did well today, didn't I? Can I ask you, please, don't divorce me?" Her expression shifted, twisting into a mocking smile. "You, with no self-respect, a worthless loser. How dare you stay by my side? Why shouldn't I divorce you? Bainbridge, listen carefully. I'm getting a divorce." The hallway was dimly lit. Fiona could see the tears streaking down my face, but she couldn't see the barely contained smirk on my face. Without a word, she grabbed a slipper from the floor and, without a shred of respect, threw it at my face. Then, the door slammed shut. Alone in the empty hallway, I finally allowed myself to smile, wide and free. I thought, divorce? Fine by me. Everyone thought I was hopelessly in love with Fiona, thinking I was a complete doormat. Fiona had taken full advantage of my devotion, shamelessly humiliating me and venting her frustration on me whenever things didn't go her way. But what she didn't know was that I'd been with her for 7 years, not out of love, but because of a contract. In the dead of night, I sat in my car with Fiona's mother, Leslie Avila. She sighed and said, "Bainbridge, I know these 7 years haven't been easy for you. Now that the contract is up, find an excuse to divorce her and be free. Just don't let Fiona find out." At the time, Fiona had been heartbroken after Johnny left her and had become suicidal. Desperate, Leslie had come up with a plan. She wanted to hire someone to pursue Fiona, help her get over her heartache, and slowly guide her back to her studies and career. Back then, I was an ideal choice. I graduated from a prestigious university, broke and desperate for money. The contract was for 7 years, with an annual salary of $5 million. Now, after playing the part for so long, this doormat was finally going to be free. I drove home exhausted, only to find a package waiting for me at the door. It was from Iloriade, far across the sea. Inside the box were intricately arranged wooden carvings, carefully wrapped in layers of foam. I couldn't help but smile. This was a rare, genuinely warm smile. I slept soundly that night. The next morning, Fiona texted me for the first time in ages, "Bring your ID. We'll meet at the courthouse." I breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. I laughed all the way to the courthouse, only to quickly put on a face full of tears when I saw her and begged her not to divorce me as usual. Fiona rolled her eyes and demanded that I apologize in front of everyone. Without hesitation, I did exactly that. But she was only more annoyed. With a sharp slap, she gritted her teeth and hissed, "You really are a pathetic, worthless loser, aren't you, Bainbridge? Do you have no dignity?" The more I gave in to her, the more she hated me. However, when I ignored her, she'd come crawling back. I felt it was impossible to figure out who was the real pathetic one. But now, to ensure the divorce went through smoothly, I bent lower than ever. Fiona glanced down at me coldly and said, "If you want me to stay married to you, then swear. I want you to swear that you'll never interfere with me and Johnny again, that you will allow us to do whatever we want. And remember, you're just my pet." I swore immediately, with pleading eyes, completely sincere, even trembling as I did. More and more people gathered around, and Fiona's frown deepened. She was clearly disgusted by my level of submission. The divorce was so close I couldn't help but smile inwardly. Fine, we won't divorce. Let's go. Her words, which she thought were a gracious favor, felt like a thunderclap to my ears. I stared at her, stunned and confused. Seeing the look of panic on my face, Fiona smirked. She was clearly delighted by her little trick. After leaving the courthouse, we headed straight for the company. I was so overwhelmed, and my mind was spinning. I couldn't understand how things could have changed so quickly. When we arrived, I saw Johnny waiting by the door. As soon as he saw Fiona, he anxiously asked if she had divorced me. When he noticed the wedding ring still on her finger, his face darkened. Fiona immediately took the ring off, but didn't offer an explanation. She led Johnny into the meeting room and announced to the entire company that Johnny, the talented overseas returnee, would now be her special assistant. She said that from now on, he'd be in charge of all her work and personal matters. Throughout it all, Fiona kept her hand tightly clutched around Johnny's, giving him all the security he needed. At that moment, she made it clear to everyone that she was his backer. I remember when Leslie first arranged for me to join the company, Fiona either yelled at me or openly gave me the cold shoulder. Everyone in the company knew that Fiona couldn't care less about me, her so-called servile husband, so they all followed her lead. In the end, I had no choice but to rely on my own efforts, working tirelessly day and night. Gradually, I made achievements and earned the respect of the whole company. During that time, I collapsed from exhaustion several times and had to be hospitalized. Fiona never once came to see me. Instead, she coldly sneered, saying, "Of course no one respects you here, you're just the president's lapdog. Figure it out yourself, don't expect any help from me." Upon thinking about that, my gaze towards Fiona unknowingly grew tinged with sadness. But thankfully, I was about to leave. That afternoon, as usual, I went to find Fiona for lunch, hoping to discuss some projects with her. Johnny stopped me outside the door, grinning smugly. "If you have anything to say, just tell me. I'll pass it along to Fiona so she doesn't get upset seeing you." When no one was paying attention, he lowered his voice, sneering, "You shameless little bast ****D. Are you enjoying being the third wheel? Open your eyes and take a good look. See how Fiona values me and how little she thinks of you." Suddenly, Johnny grabbed my hand and fell back. The hot soup from my thermos splashed onto him, and he cried out in pain. Fiona rushed out with a look of concern, gently comforting Johnny. When she turned to face me, her eyes turned cold with disgust. She slowly lifted the thermos above my head. The scalding soup, mixed with vegetable leaves and bits of meat, poured down onto my face and neck. My skin immediately turned red and burned with pain. Fiona spoke with a detached tone. "Did you forget the vow you made this morning? Don't dare touch Johnny again, or I'll abandon you." As those words hit, the entire company fell into stunned silence. Johnny, pretending to be magnanimous, hugged Fiona and said in a pitiful tone, "Fiona, don't do this to Bainbridge. He'll be heartbroken. As long as I can stay by your side, I don't care if I'm burned or even if I'm just a powerless assistant getting trampled on. Hell, I'd die for you right now." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. But Fiona smiled with satisfaction, her eyes filled with affection. She immediately announced that from today onward, I would be removed from my position as vice president and replaced by Johnny. She said, emphasizing each word, "I don't want to see anyone bully Johnny. If it happens, I won't hold back." A wave of bitter anger surged in me, and I wanted to say something, but Fiona threatened me that if I said another word, she'd file for divorce. I wanted to make the divorce go smoothly, so I looked at her calmly, then asked, "So, you've chosen him?"